Welcome again to the PM Talk Show. This is Pat Marsh, your host. We're out here on beautiful Miller Lake, and as you know, everybody is a little bit or a lot nervous about the tests that are getting ready to take place in school systems across Louisiana, and I'm talking about Common Core Pracs and all of the extra stuff that's really freaking a lot of people, kids and teachers out. And we wanted to bring on Dr. James Kirilow, who is a professor of Educational Studies at Southeastern Louisiana University, and he's also the president of the Faculty Senate at SLU. How are you doing today?
Very fine. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. I heard you speak at the school board office, and you brought out a lot of good points and in trying to get people to understand really what's going on. And I want you to know I appreciate that, because it's frightening to me, in a sense, at a lot of stuff that's going on and where it's going to lead our school system academically. So I'm going to open up the camera and let you just talk as long as you need to talk about what's going on with Common Core and PRAC, and if you can, give what those acronyms mean.
Sure. First of all, let me just provide you some assumptions that guide my thinking, because I think that's very important. I have 8 assumptions that guide my thinking, what I talk about in my classes. Number 1, education is about entering into relationships. Extremely important, begins there, ends there, and it's not a matter of semantics. Do you teach a child or do you teach a subject? Number 2, education is about entering into dialogue. Dialogue is obviously connected to relationship, but dialogue assumes another side, another point of view, very important. Number 3, education is very, very political, as evidence throughout history, but clearly what's happening in Tangipahoa Parish. Number 4, education. Taking a position of neutrality is not an option. My silence then is then an agreement to the established view, which I don't agree with. Number 5, education is about opportunity, creating opportunity. Number 6, education is about inspiration. The major goal of the teacher is to inspire. And number 7, critical to educational transformation is teacher preparation. And finally, the number 1 challenge in education is poverty.
Right.
And so that is what drives my thinking. That what drove my talk over at the at Tangipahoa Parish School Board.
Right. When I think about some of the things you said, one thing caught my attention, and that was these new tests, the programs, is a multi-million-dollar, probably multi-billion-dollar thing.
It's a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, and if I could, and you please stop me because I can go on and on, but I think a little bit of context has to be provided here, because we have so normalized accountability to standardized testing, and standardized testing has its place. Accountability obviously has its place, but they're so linked together that it's created a lot of tension in such a way that I think is unhealthy. And so I think that we have to understand that we live in an era what we can characterize as the corporatization of education, the marketization of education. Some people would call it neoliberal forces. What does that mean? That means that we have, we look at education through a market principles, through competition. And market principles and competition, the idea is it's supposed to lift everyone up. And so whether I shop at Walmart or at Target, the idea of competition, the product is going to dictate by the consumer, right? And so in education, that principle doesn't work, because inherent in market principles, you will always create winners and losers. Some will always be in, some will always be out. And so in education, we use standardized testing as that element to judge schools, to judge teachers, to judge students. And then it also works to label schools, A, B, C, D, and F schools. And so and it also works to dismantle the public square, to dismantle public education. And so that's why when you talk about charters, I know they say charters are public schools, but there is a great privatization effort that is involved with charter schools. And it works for vouchers, or what they call scholarships. And all of that is an effort to dismantle the public square. But the fact of the matter, we have 90% of kids in the United States that go to public schools, 85% or 87% go to public schools. And so if we want to move our state forward, we have to be committed to public education. But the way we're doing it through standardized testing and assessment is not working. We already know that these market principles in terms of education are not working. We still have D&F schools. We still know that students are not doing well. Is it their fault, or is it the system that is fostering that? So I think it's very important in that context of what you're talking about.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm thinking about just letting a teacher teach what they're trained and what they're certified to do. Is what your teachers did in your day. It's what mine did in my day. So why is it so difficult that this would be a new thing? Because if I'm only being taught to that one particular test, then what am I going to do when I get ready to go to college? Am I going to remember all that?
You bring up a critical issue, which is partially one of the assumptions that we have. Right now, part of that drive within that corporatization of education is the deprofessionalization of education. And the deprofessional of education views one to be a teacher as one who just needs a few tricks of the trade, that needs a few methods, that needs technique, a technician. And indeed, we have fast-track programs. Particularly, Louisiana has a large contingent of Teach for America teachers that we train for 5 weeks, and then they go in school. What schools do they mostly go to? To poor schools. You won't see Teach for America's teachers going to the more wealthy schools.
Right.
Okay? And so there's subtext, and there are issues within that. And so that kind of fast-track teaching minimizes what it means to be a teacher, minimizes, and there's even talk about whether there's relevance for teacher education programs. And also within that minimization is it devalues what it means to be a teacher. And so there's not an exploration of theories of human development, the nature of knowledge, where Paulo Freire talks about our epistemological curiosities to talk about that, to foster that, the nature of learning. What does that mean? The cultural, social, and economic forces that impact learning and teaching, and the whole dialectical interweaving of theory and practice. That needs, for one, to be immersed in a professional setting that fosters a professionalization of teaching. The number one determiner, or a great determiner, of student achievement is the teacher, and that is being clearly minimized. And that's part of all of that. And so what has happened as a consequence, many good teachers are leaving because their ability to teach in such a way to act on their professionalization has been minimized. We want technicians. We want people to follow the script. And in fact, we want students to follow the script. And so that is a direction that is not healthy, particularly in a state like ours that is very poor.
Right, and I have to agree with you, Dr. Carollo, because I go to a lot of the committee meetings at the school board office, and when it gets to the personnel part, I'm paying attention to how many teachers are leaving, and we're looking at roughly 25, sometimes less, sometimes more, of teachers, and most of them I know that are certified, so we're losing them. So how is the prac exam and Common Core going to affect our kids if we're replacing them with teachers that are not fully certified?
Well, you see, and there are multiple layers to this issue: teacher education, teacher preparation, what the assumptions, what schooling is, and so forth. Right now, our schools have become testing centers instead of learning centers, correct? And so when you talk about Common Core, what drove the emergence of Common Core was that you had the National Governors Association, and you had another group that got together to come with these Common Core standards, and they had David Coleman, who was a business person, that worked on this to get these standards so we can compare and contrast what each state is doing. And that was linked, or that is linked to PARCC testing. But in order for Common Core to operate in the states, the states had to accept that. And this is where you're going to get to state rights, you're getting into federal involvement, because the federal government was dangling $4.3 billion, and they said, we will give you X amount of dollars, but you have to accept Common Core, and what comes with that is the PARCC testing. And the problem with Common Core, it wasn't field tested, no teacher input, and no teacher input on the assessment. Now, you will have people that will say, oh yeah, there was teacher input, but that was superficially, that came a lot after the fact. Teachers didn't have a choice whether they could accept Common Core, it was just accepted. And so inherently there's some structural issues that are wrong with it, and also it's creating tension with teachers and students because it was rolled out too quickly. All of us want critical thinking, all of us want high standards, all of us want our teachers to be accountable. The question is how we're doing it is back to those market principles that I was talking to you, and Common Core is in evolvement or within that.
So the long and short of it is a business where somebody's going to make a lot of money at the expense of kids not getting the education they need and our certified teachers leaving. Am I correct in saying that?
Essentially, and it's simplifying, but yes, major publishing companies are loving this testing industrial complex, and they're linking all this together, and make no mistake about it, the money in here is in the billions.
Well, we're going for a break now. Certainly this is interesting, and we need to give some serious thought about what we need to tell our legislators, what we need to tell our superintendents that we as parents want if we want to keep our teachers. We're going for a break, and we'll be right back.
Here's your check. Oh, you got it. You know, since I got rid of my car, I really enjoy walking.
Hey? God, no.
Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates.
Oh, you're home early. You live with your mom?
That'll set your game back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Welcome back to the PM Talk Show. This is Pat Marsh, your host, and we have with us today our guest, Dr. James Kirillo, who is a professor at Southeastern Louisiana University in the Education Department. He's also president of the Faculty Senate. Before break, we were talking about Common Core and PARCC and its examples of how we're going to self-destruct pretty soon if we don't do anything. But I think you have a little more that you want to talk about.
Well, in terms of standardized testing, again, everything is in a historical context. And so I think it's very, very important that we understand that prior to, and I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but prior to 1950s, by the time a child graduated, they took 3 standardized tests, or a student graduated 3 standardized. Prior to 1965, it was on very rare occasions that a youngster would take a standardized test prior to 3rd grade. And then if you fast forward to current, students take around 21, 22 standardized tests. The United States is the most tested nation in the world. And it's very, very important that we understand that in our state in particular, we think that testing our student is going to impact achievement. Now, obviously, assessment is important, but testing doesn't impact achievement. Good teaching impacts achievement. And so we've been doing this for a long time. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but Education Week gives sort of a report card of all the states. And in K-12 achievement, the state of Louisiana got a D-, okay? Now, they've been hovering around that score for the last 20 years. And every time a score comes out, they'll say, okay, what do we do? We're going to have more test practice, more emphasis on tests instead of learning, engagement, instead of collaboration. And it is, by definition, insanity. Right. And so it's not helping kids the way that it's purported to say it is.
You know, you mentioned kids and teachers that need to teach. They really need to let the teachers teach.
Right.
They need to let them teach
what
they've been trained to do, what they've gotten certified in. Let them teach. Just doing one component or just testing on a particular thing, I can't see where that's going to help to show where a child is. How can it show when they haven't been taught anything? Because the teacher is frustrated with having to teach that test. That's not going to work. And what my fear is, where will our system end up? Now, I want to give you an example of something, and when you look at when Principal Perry was at Hammond Junior High, the NAACP had collaborated with Hammond Junior High and with Hammond High's principal, Mr. Chad Troxclair. Mr. Perry's job was to get the kids prepared to go into Hammond Junior High. Hammond High was preparing to get kids into Southeastern or any other university,
Right.
and it was working. As a result of that collaboration during that time, I got information that said that the kids who came from Hammond Junior High that were placed in the IB program, every one of those kids that was in that IB program scored advanced mastery or advanced in the program. So that told me, that convinced a lot of people that if the kids are taught, they're going to more readily remember what the teacher has taught them to do as opposed to a test, because everybody pretty well hates a test anyway.
Right, right.
So you have any comments on
Well,
that?
let me just say that obviously, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of politics of what's going on, because obviously Mr. Perry's no longer at Hammond
Right.
Junior High, and how all of that unfolded, and the reasons for all that, because he's an excellent principal, excellent person. The idea of testing going to have an impact on student achievement, again, it doesn't work that way. What has an impact on student achievement? Good teachers, and where students are in environments where engagement, where tapping into natural curiosities
Right.
is fostered. As a matter of fact, this environment of testing has narrowed the curriculum, even dumbed down the curriculum, even to a point where we objectify kids. We don't see kids any longer, we see test scores. What is one of the #1 reasons that the school system is upset that my child's going to opt out? One of the #1 reasons is because it's going to have an effect on the school score. There's no indication of understanding of how it's going to affect the child, the children. We're worried about the score. I understand about places of scores and ratings, but it has its place. So it's gotten to a point where we don't even see kids anymore. And kids that are poor, they're the ones that are actually going to be the most subjected and most harmed by this kind of system, because they do not need to be in a system. Kids that live in poverty are more, and I don't know if I mentioned this earlier but it might be worth bearing to repeat. Kids born in poverty are more likely to have low birth rate, more likely to be living in substandard housing, more likely to be in environments with low cognitive stimulation, more likely to be in environments with food deprived, and I'm talking about nutrition, and I think I might have mentioned that earlier, but they're more likely to be poor. Okay, and so the question is, what is the solution? What is the solution, particularly for kids in poverty? Well, the solution is not to be placed in an environment that is aimed to domesticate them through skill and drill. The solution is for them to be in school in an environment that opens up opportunity, that opens up engagement, that opens up to tap into their natural gifts and talents. And this environment of testing has actually subverted that, and that's not healthy.
Well, it's not healthy, so much so that I think it's about 13 parishes, I'm told, have opted out of these tests. And you have the threat that's looming over their heads. If your kids opt out, they're going to get a 0.
Right.
The school's going to get a 0 or something like that. But how is that going to affect them failing anyway? Because as strenuous as I'm told they're tested, they're bound to forget something along the way. You know, as to what, well, this is what I want you to remember. This is how you do that. You remember it like this. But what if the test has a reverse of what you being taught? And I'm confusing you a little bit. But a lot of times when you give a test, I know when I was in the school system, we would give samples of, and it was not nearly as strenuous as it is now, of what the test would be like. But if you're teaching the test period, why would the kids not get confused if they don't see the questions the same as they were when they were practicing, I want to say, on the test or learning it?
Well, I think I understand what you're saying, but if this is what part of what you're saying, it used to be at one time taboo to teach to the test. That was just not considered good teaching at all. Okay. Now we have no problems to say teaching to the test, and so many teachers are doing it, and we have a test practice, and it's not having the impact that it's purported to have in terms of achievement. Diane Ravitch, who is a historian, talked about referring to No Child Left Behind and now President Obama's Race to the Top program. The last 13 years, she says, does anybody believe that after 13 years of this, that K-12 achievement has improved? And it really hasn't, in the sense through this kind of system, and particularly for those kids that are coming from situations of poverty. And it's not working for them. You will see pockets of improvement. I would hope that you would see pocket improvements because of the skill and drill that we are subjecting our kids to.
Well, I can say this, Tangipahoa Parish needs to see a lot of improvement, a whole lot of improvement, because we're deemed as a failing school system, and even though we've come up 1 point here, 2 points here, you know, you're still failing. It's no big thing. I wouldn't, if it were me, I wouldn't want nobody to know that a whole year has gone and I've only come up 1 percentage point. I really would.
And part of what you're saying, this is where it gets back into that dismantling of the public square or public schools, because it's easy to blame schools, teachers, for everything that ails society. And so when that happens, then we end up then blaming the student. In that corporate, we actually blame the student for not doing well, instead of saying, you know, maybe the system is not quite working for the student. The conditions are set up for failure. And it doesn't mean that assessment isn't important. It is very important. The question is how we assess, how we use the tool, what is the purpose, and how do we use formative assessments, summative assessments, and how do we work in such a way that it fosters collaboration, cooperation in such a way to build the common good, to build the community. That is contrary to a corporate way of how we're viewing schools. Competition is supposed to lift up in terms of product, but we're talking about human beings. Common good lifts up human energy.
For one thing, I understand the test will be next month sometime, and after the scores are back, I want to bring you back, because I know you're going to be keeping up with all of it, to determine, to let the people know how far we came up as a school system in doing these tests.
Okay.
How do we advance? You know, because they got to release the scores at some point.
Right, right.
So
well, that
we
might
would
mean
wanna
next
know
year,
that.
and that's the almost ironic part. By the time they get these scores for park testing, that's going to be, from what I understand, next year sometime. Okay. So, and they're supposed to use this to dictate how we're supposed to data-driven teaching, but we're not going to have those results for a long time. So there's so many contradictions with all of this, for sure.
Well, if it doesn't show in that arena, it will show in our arena of current test scoring right now, and that way we'll know. And right now, it's not looking too good. I know a lot of people are opting out, and we're just about out of time. So do you have any closing remarks about that?
Well, I really appreciate this opportunity. This is a very serious issue. Because assessment has become the heart of how we cast value or judgment on kids, on communities, on teachers and parents. And we're entering an area that I think is very, very unhealthy. Right. And so I'd like to see that changed.
Right. Well, we want to thank you for coming, Dr. Carol Lowe, and you will be back to talk some more about it, because the people have a right to know. This is Pat Marsh, your host with the PM Talk Show, saying thank you for joining us. We trust that you will continue to join us, and know also that knowledge is powerful and it does matter. Thank you. God bless.